Hey everyone, I'm Michael Leggett from M&J Volksmusik and Alt Washingtonia Schuhplattler Verein in Washington, D.C., and I'm interviewing Rick Michels, the Musikwart of the Gauverband Nordamerika. Rick, how are you doing?
I'm good, Mikey. Servus, Christi. How are you?
Good, good. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, let's see. What can I tell you? My name is Rick Michels. I'm 68 years old. I belong to the Gebirgstrachten Erhaltungsverein Edelweiss here in Detroit, where I have been Musikwart for several years, longer than I can remember, really. And I'm also Gaumusikwart of the Gauverband Nordamerika.
Awesome, great, thanks, Rick. So what really is the Gauverband Nordamerika, and what is the Musicwart's role in that?
The Gauverband Nordamerika, Mikey, is the umbrella organization of 74 Bavarian folk costume preservation clubs in the US and Canada. Among its goals goals, I guess is the best you could say, is the preservation first and foremost of the authentic Bavarian Gebirgstracht or mountain costume. Along with that, the preservation of authentic and historical dances, the folk music, the language, customs, and traditions. And the Musikwart's role in that, my particular position in the Gauverband's hierarchy, if you want to call it that, or better, uh, slate of officers as Gaumusikwart, is that I advise member clubs and individual members on all things related to authentic Bavarian, Austrian, Alpine folk music. Um, I secure appropriate music for them if they have questions. And if I don't have it in my own personal library, I try to suggest places for them to look for it and secure it. I maintain close ties with like-minded Bavarian Trachtler and organizations such as the Landesverein für Heimatpflege, the Volksmusikarchiv of Oberbayern or Upper Bavaria, um, associations like that. As sources for Volksmusik, I conduct workshops at the regional and Gau level. I organize at Gaufests the Gau Heimatabend and the Bauernmesse, and I also rehearse and conduct or the Gaukapelle. So that basically, in a nutshell, is my role as Gau Musikwart.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll definitely touch on some things that you mentioned later in the interview. But how did you first get involved in the Trachten world? And what inspired you to want to become the music part?
Well, that's a long story. I'll try and shorten it. When I was a kid, I was in my teen years. I always played accordion, and my parents
Hmm.
always attended events of Edelweiss Detroit. And I was sent one day to pick up tickets for one of these events at the secretary's house. And I mentioned that I played accordion, and she mentioned that the dance group needed another accordion player. And I was always interested in the Schuhplattler. I was always interested after watching both the youth group and the adult group dance at various events. So I said, well, sure, I'd be willing to do it. And that's kind of how I got my first taste of the whole Trachten movement. So I was in with both feet, and I ended up playing for the youth group and later on the adult group. And then I very quickly after joined the youth group, Schuhplattler group, and then advanced to the adult group. And yeah, that kind of is it in a nutshell. As far as Gaumusikwart goes, I was kind of well. It happened. Let's backtrack. It happened in 1994. The position of Volksmusikwart was relatively new on the board of the Gauverband Nordamerika. I think it had only been in existence for 3 or 4 years, and the former Gau Volksmusikwart before me, Dan Beeler, had some health issues and he stepped down. So I kind of got more than gentle pushes from fellow Trachtler to kind of step into that position. And at first I was a little apprehensive. I don't know, this is a new position. I don't know how I'm gonna fill it out, how I'm gonna go about it. But once again, I stepped in with both feet, and the rest is history. So I've been Gaumusikwart since. So
Wow, great. Well, you mentioned the accordion, and I think most of the Gauverband knows how great of a Steirischer harmonica player you are.
oh, thank
How did
you.
that come about? How'd you come to learn that?
Well, as you said, and as I said, I started with piano accordion.
Right.
I think I was only in the third grade when I started. Back in the early 60s, every Polish, German, Irish, Italian kid in my neighborhood played accordion. So I was no different. And I think I was in my late 20s before I even purchased a Ziech, a Steirische Harmonika. I was spurred on by an older member, well, older than me, in Edelweiss, Detroit. His name was Herbert Langegger, and he played Ziech, or
Hmm.
Buttonbox Steirische Harmonika. It goes by several names. And I was always fascinated by it. And the thing that really pushed me was my good friend, Erwin Rauschendorfer. You know him, Mikey.
Hmm.
He's the president of our club, has been for years. He bought one, or his grandmother bought one for him, something like that, the story goes. Anyway, I was super jealous and I had to have one too. So I found one somewhere here locally in Detroit and I bought my first one. It was a Melodia, a Slovenian box. And we practiced together and we went over to Herbert, the older gentleman's house. He couldn't read music. We did not read music for Steirische Harmonika. We didn't know about Griffschrift back then.
Hmm.
So we just kind of played together and figured it out together. And that's kind of the story. Later on, I got a hold of some Griffschrift and kind of taught myself. But basically, I we do it all by ear and kind of muddle along, and that's how it's been going. So
Yeah, great. No, I can kind of share a similar experience with wanting to play button box. I started on piano accordion, but um, we had Betty Heyman and Edie Brown and Sally Ann in the group at the time, and they were all button box players, and I was like, no, that's what I want to play. That's
yeah,
it's just
exactly. It's the
there's
same
that
with me,
sound
Mikey.
is
Yeah, the
yeah,
sound is just it's captivating.
yeah,
I just had to learn how to play it.
yeah,
And,
exactly. Um, so what do you feel as music art are some of your greatest accomplishments?
oh my, ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, Mikey. I think among some of them is advancing and kind of making our Trachtler here in Gauverband more aware of actual Volksmusik and its importance in our Trachtleben, in our lives as Trachtler. Raising kind of the bar for the Heimatabend and the Bauernmesse back in the old days. Boy, I could tell you stories about how it went, but it has come a long way. And you saw at the last Gaufest yourself, Michael, what great performances we had at the Heimatabend of
Yeah.
authentic, really good Bavarian, Austrian Volksmusik. Um, the Gaukapelle is certainly bringing that to the forefront, establishing it way back when in 2011 and watching it grow and become what it is today. You heard yourself, and you're in it. So you and Jesse, so
Hmm.
you know how far we've come in those 12 years, and it sounded great at the last Gaufest. Maintaining ties, that's important too. Maintaining ties with Trachtler musician friends in Bavaria. Chief among them is my years long friend Thomas Eiler from Rothenbuch, who is the director of the Lechgau Kapelle. He's helped me so much, and I value that friendship and that tie. So, and others too. So, yeah, I guess that's about it for some of the accomplishments, or some of the ones I can really recall as some of the best ones.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with all of those. I mean the Heimatabend especially. I mean that's just it's the highlight of the Galfest, I think, for me, and I think for a lot of people. Hearing the talent and the real folk music that members of our Gauverband can provide. It's really
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, and it's very gratifying for me as Gaumusikwart. So, yeah.
Yeah, good. And kind of going off that, this is probably the hardest question, but do you have a favorite part about being Gaumusikwart?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that. Oh man, that's a hard one, Mikey. I think one of the favorite parts is watching young people develop a love for Volksmusik over the years. You're a great example. So is Jesse, Eric. I could name a whole ton of now. Nate Trox, lots of kids in my own verein. My own daughters, uh, my son-in-law. There's a whole group of Edelweiss Detroit kids who have grown up with a love and appreciation for Volksmusik, and I think um, that's probably one of the most gratifying things, one of the most favorite parts about being Gaumusikwart.
Nice. Yeah. No, definitely agree. And yeah, I have to thank you. I mean, for being such a great friend and mentor to me, and keeping me with the folks music all these years since I was a kid. So appreciate it.
Once you're hooked, Mikey,
Yep.
you're hooked for life. Um,
That's the truth. Um, and also kind of a tough question. Do you have like a favorite Trockler moment that you've experienced?
oh, well, let's see. I can't name just one, Michael. I certainly can't. But certainly in the top are the following. Certainly playing at the Oidiwiesen in 2014 with our own Sieswasser Tanzelmusik from Edelweiss Detroit. And last year with the Gaukapelle, with help from our friends in the Lechgau Kapelle too.
Mhm.
Those were just such memorable moments for me as Gaumusikwart. The Lechgau Kapelle playing at your Gaufest in 2019, Thomas Eiler and all of the gang from the Lechgau Kapelle, and our reciprocal trip to them last year after the ODVs, and the following Wednesday we spent the day together, went to the Zugspitze, played a concert later on, and it was just wonderful. And of course, the Gau Kapelle is my pride and joy. So those three things, I guess, if I had to narrow it down. There are many more, but if I had to narrow it down.
Yeah, no, that's fair. No, I like those a lot. um, so kind of shifting gear a little bit. Um, we definitely want to talk about folks music. Um, so if you can, what is folks music?
Woo! Let's see. In a nutshell, let's see. It's a style of music that kind of grew out of the musicality and the needs of a folk, a people in a specific region. And obviously, for our intents and purposes, that specific region is Bavaria and Austria, and even more specifically, Alpine Bavaria and Austria. It's based on a few fundamental forms. It's it follows some not strict, but from some very basic musical rules without getting into too much detail. Um, yeah, so that's about it in a nutshell.
Hmm. Yeah. That's without going into all the, all these different regions within Bavaria and
Yeah,
Austria having their own
I mean, we could
styles, and
we could talk for days
you're
on that,
right.
Mikey.
Yeah.
That's
Um, and also what's kind of interesting is how it's kind of even the extra folk music is kind of evolving. A lot of the newer, the younger people I see playing, especially on the button box, throwing these accidentals and giving almost an Oberkreiner feel to the music. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it has to change, Mike. It has to
Mhm.
change to remain viable. It can't stay stuck. I mean, it changes slowly. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
It
Right.
because of what it is, and because of its ties to a specific region and to the customs of the people in that region, it changes very slowly. But it has to change. And you're right. There's a big surge now in kind of an Oberkreiner tone to what people are playing. There's things like you said, adding accidentals, modernizing it to some degree,
Mhm.
syncopation. You
Mhm.
never heard that before. And there's so many good groups now, though,
Yeah.
that play echte Volksmusik. You think of the Tegernseer Tanzelmusik, the Hallgrafenmusikanten. I mean, you could go on and on and on. The
Mhm.
Weissengröner, there's so many that are just so great. And the young people throng to these Borische Tänze,
Mhm.
whenever people say, oh, it's only for old people. No, that's not the case. The young people are going like crazy. I've seen it. I've been there. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Um, and on an important topic, how should people distinguish between, the traditional echte Volksmusik from other kinds of, what we would consider Bavarian Alpine music?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, Mikey, and that's another one we could spend days on. There's a difference between echte Volksmusik and what is known as volkstümliche Schlager,
Mm.
or kind of the folk pop version of authentic traditional Bavarian folk music. Um, yeah, one of the biggest differences is that volkstümliche um, music is marketed, heavily marketed, and it's purely for entertainment. That's not the
Mm.
case with real Volksmusik. It's not purely for entertainment. Certainly, that's the underlying um, theme and goal um, of all music, but the sales and marketing and purely for entertainment and appealing to a wide um, group of people. That's not the case with authentic folk music either. It's never going. It's too specific. It's never going to appeal to a broad range of the public,
Mm.
and it's not really meant to. And that's one of the biggest differences. You can look at the instrumentation too. A lot of Volkstümliche groups have things like electric bass guitars,
Mm.
keyboards, guitars that are strummed instead of plucked. That's kind of a giveaway too. You can look at the titles of the songs, Resi Holde mit mein Trachter ab, that's not going to be an authentic folk music song. Um, as far as singing goes, you can look at the words, the text, if you're familiar with any of the regional dialects in Bavaria. Real folk songs, authentic Volkslieder are always sung in a regional dialect. They're not they're not modified. The text is not modified so that um, non-dialect speaking people can understand it. That's just not part of it.
Mhm.
um, yeah, some of the titles, you can, like I said, you can go by the titles. And if you look at the CD, well, not so much CDs anymore, but back in the day, you looked at the covers or even pamphlets where they're advertised. And if it's flashy and the Tracht is a little questionable for us as Trachtler, that's kind of a dead giveaway too, that it's not authentic folk music. Authentic folk music advertising tends to be muted, tends to be a little more demure, I might say. It's not so in your face. If anything hints of kitsch or, kind of marketing flash, that's basically a dead giveaway. So, yeah, that's about all I can think of.
Yeah,
So,
those are really good points. Actually, kind of going back to the songs, I remember you gave a workshop. I think it was at a Gal Delegates meeting. I can't remember which one, but I remember you saying about songs, about how important it is to keep the regional dialect and not try to, modernize the German or change it to, you know, like a Hochdeutsch,
Yeah, yeah,
because
exactly.
it's important. It's also keeping the language alive, which is also an important part. Um,
That's a great point, and that's part of the function of Volksmusik is to keep the language and the customs alive. It's all intertwined. You can't separate one from the other.
mhm,
Um, yeah, the regional dialect, it tells where you're from. It identifies you as being an Allgäuer or a Berchtesgadener or someone else, Franken. It's what identifies you. It's an important part of the culture. And there's even well, not kind of, but there is a wholehearted attempt to keep the dialects alive in school
mhm.
for grade school kids in Bavaria, and I think it's a great thing. I think if you lose the way you speak, you lose part of your identity. Every kid who speaks dialect is going to learn Hochdeutsch anyway.
Mhm.
But you need to keep your regional dialect alive because, like I said, I think if it dies out, then a part of you dies out with it, and I firmly believe that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And with kind of going off singing too, the yodeler is obviously a pretty distinctive part of Alpine folk music. Is what is known about its history and origins?
Oh man, that's a good question, Mikey. It's got a long history, yeah, much contested history
Hmm.
too, depending on what article you read or who you talk to. Some people say it goes back to prehistoric times. Um, Others say certainly the documentation goes back to the 17th and 18th centuries. That's been proven. Um, in the early 1800s or the beginning of the 19th century, the yodeler kind of experienced a real boom in that singing groups from Tyrol, the Tyrol region of Austria, began traveling and bringing the yodeler or the sound of the yodeler to big metropolises in throughout Europe, and it really caught on. It became internationally known. It eventually even made its way to the US, where it found its way into country western music and even some jazz pieces, which I find fascinating. During the Napoleonic Wars, when Napoleon and his Bavarian allies were trying to take over Tyrol, the yodeler was used by the Tyroleans as a kind of a symbol of rebellion.
Hmm.
The sound of the yodeler was a symbol of rebellion against the French and the Bavarian allies. Unfortunately, during the Second World War, it was used by the Nazi Party as a symbol of Aryan culture, and it was promoted and supported as such. That is when the Swiss decided to distance themselves from the Bavarian and Austrian form of the yodeler. They formed their own yodel federation. Interestingly enough, I believe it was in the 1930s when all this happened. And as I said, they formed their own yodel federation and they developed their own style of yodeler, which is also very close to the way the yodeler is sung in the Allgäu region, because it's also an Alemannish speaking area. So their version of the yodeler is very similar. But the point is, the Swiss very vehemently distanced themselves from this whole idea of it being a symbol of Aryan culture, and in so doing, they, as I said, formed this federation and developed their own style of yodeling. So there is definitely a Bavarian Austrian style, and there is a Swiss Allgäuerisch style of yodeler. But it after the war, kind of because of that connotation, kind of lost popularity a little bit. But today it's as popular as it ever has been. There are even yodel courses offered. In fact, I don't know if you know Zepp Kindle. He's
Hmm.
an Ehrenmitglied of our Gauverband. He's from Diesen am Ammersee. His son Magnus is very involved with the city of Munich and their folk music cultural department, and
Mm.
he offers or conducts regular courses on yodeling for beginners,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's very cool. It's like I said, it's now just as popular as it ever has been.
Yeah, wow, that's a very interesting history. I didn't really know all that. I mean, yeah, you can definitely hear the differences in like Swiss style and Bavarian and Austrian style, but that's interesting
Yeah.
how
The
that.
Swiss and the Allgäuer tend to perform the yodeler in a choir as part of
Mm,
a
mm,
choir, a bigger choral setting. Whereas in Bavaria and Austria, it's usually only one, two, or three singers, zwei Gesang, drei Gesang,
right.
something like that,
Hmm.
or maybe a quartet. But the Swiss have big choirs, and the Allgäu too, very good ones too.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And I guess is there any connection, the American South's kind of style of yodeling? Um, can we say that was influenced at all by, Alpine yodeling?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think definitely we can say that. Um, and a lot of cultures too have their own version of the yodeler. Um, and Scandinavia comes to mind. There are even native tribes in Africa who have a sort of a form of yodeling as a means of communication
Mm,
or sending news out,
hmm.
or as a means of alerting somebody to something. So every culture, I think, has some form of a vocalization that approximates a yodeler or an Almschrua, as we say, the kind of the cries from the mountain pastures. Um, doesn't have to be in a mountain setting, but I think every culture has some kind of form. So I think certainly the Alpine yodeler influenced the our
Hmm.
country western version of the yodeler. I think that's safe to say.
Okay, great. Um, and kind of the big question of this all, is, because of course, and when people associate with German or Bavarian music, they think of Kufsteinlied, they think of Bergvagabunden, Zillertal Hochzeitsmarsch, that kind of thing. Um, but what and that's all great, and people love them, and they're great to dance to and enjoy. But why should people care? Especially as it pertains to us American trachtlers. Um, why should people care and be generally more aware of the differences between the echte Volksmusik and other kinds of Volksmusik?
That's a great question, Mikey, and that's an important question. If you think about it, we as Trachtler are really preservationists. We're really purists in nature, what we do. Um, not only, well, yes, with the Tracht, we strive to be as authentic as we possibly can. It's a little harder for us here in North America because of the distance, and we have other obstacles to overcome too. But by and large, we do a pretty darn good job of preserving the Tracht in its authenticity. Same with the dances. There are some exceptions, granted, but for the most part, the historical dances, the Schuhplattler, of course, the Volkstänze, we do a good job of preserving them in their most authentic form. And that's our job as Trachtler. We're essentially preservationists. And the same goes for Volksmusik. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the Kufsteinlied. There's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with Bergvagabunden, but it's all purely entertainment music. And we can hear those 365 days out of the year, really. So I think we should concern ourselves more with the authentic folk music of Bavaria and Austria. I mean, we only get together every 2 years, and this is the place, a Gaufest, and the regional fests are the place where, of all places, we should be hearing echte Volksmusik. I mean, if you went to let me see if I can come up with an example. If we went to some authentic historical event or some event that was plugged as being as authentic as it could be. And their costumes were period costumes. The setting was perfectly in accordance with the historical times. Um, but they played modern music or modern influenced music. I think we would be pretty disappointed in that whole thing. And I think it's the same for a Gaufest. I mean, we've done a good job recently, and we continue to improve. And I always say Rome wasn't built in a day. You know, the Gauverband started out concerning itself with the Tracht and the Schuhplattler, but now it's time to move on. You know, we've done a good job with those. We've
Mhm.
done a good job with those so far. So, and we're making lots of progress. You know, you look at the Gaukapelle, you look at the performances at the Heimatabend, you look at um, groups like the Enzian Musikanten from the Delaware Sängerbund, you guys in Alt Washingtonia. I mean, I could name a bunch of people, and Eric Ray and the Minnesota group. It's getting so much better, and it continues to improve. But it's important for us. You know, our flags always say, Sitt und Tracht der Alten wollen wir erhalten, or treu dem guten alten Brauch. That means faithful to the old customs. Um, it's not faithful to what's currently modern, or it's faithful to the old customs. It doesn't mean, however, being stuck in the past. We
Mhm.
have to, like we said earlier, Volksmusik has to change to remain viable. And but it's a slow change, and it's a very specific manner in which it changes. But we'll get there, Mikey. We'll get there.
Sounds good. No, yeah, no, I completely agree. You have any suggestions in terms of, where to find more about Echte Volksmusik? What are some best practices in looking for and finding it, either just to listen to or to perform?
Well, let's see. I mean, we have the internet now. It's a
Yeah.
lot. It's way easier nowadays than when I was your age and dinosaurs still roamed the earth. We got things like BR Heimat. They play Volksmusik rund die Uhr,
Hmm.
practically 24 hours a day. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with Schwani 3 and
Hmm.
Schwani 4. Yeah, they play Volksmusik. You can listen to that. There's a website called Echte Volksmusik you can go to. If you're looking for notes, whether instrumental or choral, the Bayerische Landesverein für Heimatpflege, the Volksmusikarchiv in Oberbayern. There's a website called Stammtischmusik Kloster Neuburg. They have, oh my gosh, they have so many notes of Volksmusik. It's incredible. Karl Edelmann, if you're looking for Tanzelmusik or Blasmusik, his Musikverlag in Weilheim, I've been there several times. He's a great guy. He's got a ton of really, really good Volksmusik.
Hmm.
The Gaukapelle plays lots of it.
Right.
So there's lots of places you can go. I mean, especially now with the internet, there's one called Volksmusik in Niederbayern too. They have Tanzelmusik and Blasmusik notes on their website that you can download for free. I mean,
Oh, great.
it's really cool.
Okay, yeah, those are great resources, and I'll take some of the links and put them in the description of this video.
Okay,
That way
yeah,
people can access it
yeah, good.
easily. Um, so do you have any kind of final thoughts on folks music?
Whew. Let's see. Final thoughts. Hmm. Well, I can't imagine my life without it. It is certainly, yeah, it's a cultural heritage that is valuable, it's worth preserving, it's worth fostering, it's worth promoting, and it's most of all, um, it deserves to be handed down to our kids and grandkids. It's just such a rich part of the culture. I wrote an article for the last Scout Zeitung called "Kein Fest ohne Musik," and that's true. You can't have a fest without music. There is no celebration without music. It's the essential part of our culture, and it's very important. And like I said before, I can't imagine my life without it. It has enriched my life so much, and I know yours too, and Jesse's too, and so many other people. Your life is made so much richer just by by playing the music and even just listening to it. It's not even a matter of playing it. It's yeah, it's a rich cultural heritage.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I mean, especially, it's just another layer for Jesse and I to connect on when we play together. And
Exactly.
gosh, when CS Foster Tonsilmusic's playing, we're on the dance floor and you can't get us off.
I know
So
you guys are always on the dance floor, and it's so much fun.
yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
it's just so much fun when the dance floor is full and people are dancing to your music. You can't even describe the feeling. It's
Yeah.
just so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, one more kind of fun question before we go. Other than the Steyrischer harmonica, of course, what is your favorite traditional instrument?
Oh, you mean I have to name just one? I can't. I
Well, you
can't.
can, okay, you can two or three.
All right. Um, Hochbrett, I love. Harfe,
Hmm,
the harp, I think is so cool. Um, in the realm of Holz- and Blasinstrumente, brass and woodwind instruments, oh gosh. All right, I'm going to name four.
okay.
Um, I love the tenor horn. I think
Hmm,
when there is a group of three or four tenor horns playing, it's such a melodious and such a wonderful, warm sound.
yeah.
It's hard to describe. And the last one is, of course, the clarinet, the Königin der Volksmusik, the Queen of Volksmusik. I love the sound of a nice woody sound of a clarinet. It's incomparable.
Yeah.
So there you have it.
Yeah. Those are great answers. Well, Rick, thank you so much for taking the time to do this video.
Sure
And
thing,
beyond that,
Michael.
everything you do for the Gauverband, we really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I love doing it.
Great. All right. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Bye bye.
Bye.
Servus.